The desert sun beat down on the Apache village as screams erupted across the dusty plaza. A massive bull, eyes wild with fury, had broken free from its pen. The ground trembled beneath its thundering hooves as it charged, scattering terrified villagers in its wake. Only one soul remained unmoved: Gózhŭ, the paralyzed elder whose legs had failed him years ago. While others fled to safety, he sat alone in the bull's path, his weathered face showing neither fear nor doubt. The beast lowered its horns, nostrils flaring with each heaving breath. Instead of attempting escape, Gózhŭ did something unthinkable. He extended his arms toward the charging animal. Could the wisdom of one broken warrior tame the fury that even the strongest men couldn't contain? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Long before the bull's fury descended upon the village, Gózhŭ had been known as he of the steady heart, a name earned in his youth when he stood unflinching his enemy. Arrows rained around him. Above his simple bed hung a battered war shield, its leather face marked with symbols of eagle feathers and lightning strikes, telling the story of battles won and honors earned. In the flickering light of his evening fire, Gózhŭ's weathered hands often traced these symbols, remembering the man he once was. 15 summers had passed since his legs had failed him, taken not by enemy weapons, but by a fall from a cliff during a buffalo hunt. The ground had been wet from spring rains, the ledge treacherous. He still remembered the sickening sensation of falling, the sharp crack as his spine met stone, and then the terrible stillness in his lower body that never left. "You are drifting again, husband," Hijoni said softly, her gentle hands placing a warm cup of pine needle tea beside him. Though her hair had grayed and lines had deepened around her eyes, she remained as steadfast as the day they had wed 40 years before. "The past calls loudly tonight," he replied, accepting the cup, "perhaps because the spirits are restless." Hijoni nodded, understanding in her eyes. Since childhood, Gózhŭ had possessed a connection with animals and the natural world that few could comprehend. Even before becoming a renowned warrior, he had been the boy who could calm startled horses, who wolves would approach without fear. That gift had not diminished with his injury. If anything, it had deepened during the long, silent hours when pain kept him from sleep. The village had changed in its treatment of him since his fall. Where once young warriors had gathered eagerly to hear his counsel, now many passed his dwelling with respectful but distant nods. Some of the elders still sought his wisdom, recognizing that physical strength and spiritual insight were separate gifts, but the younger generation increasingly looked elsewhere for leadership. "Little Wind came today," Hijoni mentioned, settling beside him. He asked if he would tell him again of the great council when the 7 tribes made peace. Gózhŭ's eyes brightened. Little Wind, his 8-year-old grandson, showed signs of the same sensitivity to the spirit world. "He is a good boy. He listens not just with his ears, unlike some others," Hijoni said with a small smile. She did not need to specify whom she meant. Tarak, the son of the current chief, made no secret of his belief that injured warriors should not occupy places of honor in the tribe. As darkness settled over the village, Gózhŭ closed his eyes in prayer. Sleep came slowly that night, but when it did, it brought dreams more vivid than any he had experienced in years. Soaring eagles circled above him, their shadows crossing his face as their calls echoed across red canyon walls. In the dream, he stood upon his own 2 feet, feeling the earth solid beneath him, a sensation now foreign in his waking life. "The time approaches," a voice like wind through pine needles whispered. "You were broken so you could be rebuilt. You were silenced so you would learn to listen." He tried to question the voice, to understand its meaning, but the dream shifted. The eagles descended, their wings brushing his face before they transformed into smoke that formed the unmistakable shape of a massive bull with eyes like burning coals. Gózhŭ woke with a start, his heart pounding, sweat cooling on his brow, despite the night's chill. Beside him, Nijoni slept peacefully, unaware of the portent that had visited her husband. For 3 consecutive nights, the dream returned, each time more detailed, more urgent. On the 3rd morning, as dawn painted the eastern sky with streaks of gold and crimson, Gózhŭ finally understood. The spirits were preparing him for a test one that would require all the courage that had made him a celebrated warrior, and all the wisdom gained through years of suffering. "You have seen something," Nijoni observed that morning as she helped him from their sleeping mats to his wheeled chair, a gift crafted by his brother after the accident. "Yes," he admitted, "but its meaning is still unclear." What he did not tell her was the growing certainty that whatever trial approached would require a sacrifice from him. The thought brought not fear, but a calm resolve. For years he had questioned his purpose, wondering why the spirits had left him alive but incomplete. Perhaps now he would discover the answer. That very afternoon, word came to the village that traders from the south were approaching with livestock to barter, including a bull of exceptional size and strength. As murmurs of excitement spread through the community, Gózhŭ felt the eagles of his dreams stirring in his spirit. The wheel of destiny had begun to turn, and he alone seemed to hear its creaking progress. "He of the steady heart," he whispered to himself, fingers brushing the symbols on his old shield. "Soon we shall see if that name still holds true." Dawn arrived with the familiar sounds of the village, coming to life, women grinding corn between stone matadas, children laughing as they fetched water from the stream, men preparing for hunting or tending to the small herds that sustained the tribe through harsh winters. At the center of the settlement stood the council fire, its stones arranged in a perfect circle, blackened from countless flames that had illuminated tribal decisions. Since before anyone's grandfathers were born, the summer of 1874 had been kind. Thus far, spring rains had brought abundant grass for the horses, and wild game remained plentiful in the surrounding hills. Yet beneath this prosperity ran an undercurrent of unease. White settlers pushed ever closer to tribal lands, and tensions with neighboring Navajo bands had intensified following disputes over water rights and hunting grounds. Gózhŭ wheeled himself to his customary morning spot beneath an ancient cottonwood tree where he could observe the village without intruding on its activities. From here, he greeted passing children who still approached him without the awkwardness adults sometimes displayed. "Tell us of the bear spirit again, grandfather," begged little Tayuta, her eyes bright with anticipation as several other children gathered around his chair. Before he could begin, a sharp voice interrupted. "Tayuta, your mother needs you. These are not times for idle stories." Tarek, the chief's son, stood tall and imposing, his 20 summers evident in the proud set of his shoulders. The children scattered reluctantly, casting apologetic glances toward Gózhŭ. "The young ones find value in the old ways," Gózhŭ said mildly, meeting Tarek's gaze without challenge. "Old ways will not protect us from new threats," Tarek replied. "The council gathers at midday. Traders approach with cattle to strengthen our herds. My father says all should attend." Beneath his neutral expression, Gózhŭ noted the deliberate omission. Tarek had not explicitly invited him to the council. Though still technically an elder, his voice carried diminishing weight in tribal decisions. As Tarek strode away, Nijoni appeared with a bowl of stewed rabbit and wild onions. "That one struts like a rooster who believes his crow brings the dawn," she murmured, settling beside her husband. "He fears weakness," Gózhŭ replied. "He has not yet learned that strength wears many faces." By midday, excitement rippled through the village. The council fire had been lit, its smoke rising straight upward in the still air, a good omen. Chief Nantai, Tarek's father and a fair-minded leader, took his place at the head of the circle. Though only 10 summers older than Gózhŭ, responsibility had aged him prematurely, deepening the lines on his copper face. "The dying traders bring strong stock," Nantai announced as villagers gathered, "including a bull unlike any seen in our territory. They claim it came from far Mexico lands." Whispers spread through the assembly. Livestock represented both wealth and survival. The tribe's cattle helped them remain independent when game grew scarce in winter months. With Nijoni's help, Gózhŭ positioned his chair at the edge of the circle. Though no one directly objected to his presence, he noted how conversation flowed around him like water around a stone in a stream. The traders arrived with the afternoon sun high overhead. Their small herd of cattle appeared sturdy and well-fed, but all eyes were drawn to the massive bull that towered above the rest. Its hide gleamed black as obsidian, muscles rippling beneath as it pawed the earth. Most striking were its eyes, alert, watchful, with an intelligence that seemed to assess each person it beheld. "The beast is unnatural," whispered an elder woman, named Kasa, whose knowledge of plants and medicine made her respected throughout the region. She had paused beside Gózhŭ's chair, one of the few who still sought his counsel regularly. "How so?" he asked, studying the animal with growing unease. His dreams flashed in his memory eagles, transforming into a bull with eyes like burning coals. "Look how the other cattle avoid it," she noted. "Animals recognize what men often miss." The observation was accurate. Despite being herded together, the other cattle maintained distance from the great bull, as if repelled by an invisible boundary. The trading commenced with typical ceremony offerings of tobacco, expressions of goodwill between tribes. "Chief." Nantai bartered skillfully, exchanging woven blankets, dried meat, and painted pottery for several healthy cows. When discussion turned to the bull, the lead trader lowered his voice. "This one comes with a history, captured from wild lands where strange powers are said to dwell. It has strength beyond ordinary cattle, but requires a strong hand." "Our warriors are not lacking in strength," Tarek interjected proudly. "Something." In the trader's expression, a flicker of concern quickly masked, caught Gózhŭ's attention. Before he could voice his concern, the deal was struck. For an exceptionally fine horse and several intricately worked silver pieces, the great bull would remain with the village dot. As the council dispersed, Gózhŭ felt a weight settle in his chest, a premonition of trouble he could not yet name. The bull's gaze had found him during the proceedings, fixing on him with unsettling focus, before being led away to a hastily reinforced pen at the village edge. Unusual restlessness pervaded the settlement. Dogs barked without apparent cause. Horses shifted nervously in their enclosures. And from the direction of the new bull's pen came a low, continuous sound, not quite a bellow, more like the rumble that precedes an earthquake. Morning revealed small, painted stones scattered at the village perimeter, dark omens that sent a ripple of disquiet through the tribe. The stones bore markings in red ochre, spirals that doubled back on themselves in patterns known to belong to the Navajo shaman Ashkai, whose name translated simply as boy, though he had seen more than 60. "Winters. These were not here yesterday," declared Kasa, as tribal guards gathered the stones in deerskin pouches, careful not to touch them directly. "Someone placed them during the night." Chief Nantai's face remained impassive, but his eyes betrayed concern. "Post additional guards. Check all approaches to the village." Gózhŭ, wheeling himself forward despite Nijoni's cautioning hand on his shoulder, spoke words that many had been thinking. "This is Ashki's work. The stones are curse, tokens." The rivalry between their people and Ashki's band stretched back 3 generations, to a time when both tribes had competed for the same fertile valley during a terrible drought. What began as competition for resources had evolved into blood. Feud after warriors from both sides died in skirmishes near the contested waterways. Peace had been negotiated twice, broken twice. For Gózhǫ, the conflict held personal significance. 20 years earlier, before his injury, he had led a successful defense of the village against Ashki's raiders. Though he had spared the shaman's life when opportunity presented itself, an act of mercy that conformed to his belief in honorable combat, Ashki had viewed the mercy as humiliation, a stain on his reputation that demanded vengeance. Ashki would not dare direct attack after last season's treaty. Tarek dismissed, though his hand rested meaningfully on his knife hilt. Some enemies strike through shadows when sunlight reveals their weakness. Gózhǫ replied, earning a sharp glance from the young warrior Dot as council members dispersed to their duties. Gózhǫ requested to be taken to the bull's pen. Something about the animal's arrival, coinciding with the discovery of curse tokens, stirred his suspicions. From 20 paces away, he could hear the bull's labored breathing and the heavy impact as it repeatedly charged the pen walls. 2 young men stood guard, their expressions betraying unease. "Has it eaten?" Gózhǫ inquired, noting the untouched feed. "Nothing since arrival," one guard answered. "And its eyes?" "They are wrong, grandfather." Indeed, as Gózhŭ approached closer, he could see the bull's eyes unnaturally bright, almost fevered, rolling wildly as the massive beast paced its enclosure. When its gaze fell upon Gózhŭ, the animal grew suddenly still, nostrils flaring, before throwing itself against the pen barrier with renewed fury. That afternoon, Gózhŭ requested an audience with Chief Nantai. Despite Tarek's objection that there were more pressing concerns than an old man's fears, the chief granted the meeting in his dwelling. "The bull and the curse tokens are connected," Gózhŭ stated without preamble. "I believe Ashki has performed spirit binding on the animal. It carries his malice." Chief Nantai frowned. "A serious accusation. What evidence supports this?" The trader's unease when questioned about the bull's origins, the behavior of other animals toward it, the timing of its arrival with the tokens, and Gózhŭ hesitated before continuing. My dreams have warned of this." At the mention of dreams, Tarak made a dismissive sound, but fell silent at his father's sharp glance. "Dreams are not evidence," the chief said gently, "though I do not discount their importance as you might, son," he added, with a pointed look at Tarek. "I ask only that you consider the possibility," Gózhŭ pressed. "The bull should be removed from the village until a purification ceremony can be performed." Before the chief could respond, a commotion erupted outside shouts of alarm and the distinctive sound of wood splintering. They emerged to discover the bull had broken through the first wall of its pen, contained only by a secondary barrier, hastily reinforced by panicked handlers. That evening, as council members gathered to discuss strengthening the enclosure, Gózhŭ sat apart, lost in thought. In his dwelling, he carefully arranged sacred items from his medicine bundle eagle feathers, stones from sacred mountains, herbs gathered under specific moons. As he prayed, the same dream vision returned more vividly than before. This time, the eagle spirit spoke clearly. "What others flee, you must embrace. Only surrender conquers hatred's curse." Gózhŭ opened his eyes to find Nijoni watching him, her face lined with worry. "You are preparing for something dangerous," she observed. Not a question, but a statement born of decades of partnership. "Yes," he acknowledged, "but necessary." Outside their dwelling, a cold wind had begun to blow, unseasonable for summer. In the distance, thunder rumbled, the first indication of a storm approaching from the mountains where Ashki and his people dwelled. Dawn broke with an unnatural stillness. No birds sang, no children's voices carried across the village plaza. The entire community seemed to hold its breath, waiting for something undefined, yet palpable. The bull's pen had been reinforced overnight, thick posts driven deep into the earth, crossbeams lashed tight with rawhide that had been soaked, and would shrink as it dried, creating bonds stronger than rope. 4 of the tribe's strongest warriors had worked through darkness to complete the enclosure, their efforts punctuated by the bull's unpredictable charges and snorts of rage. From his vantage point beneath the cottonwood, Gózhŭ observed the pen keeper's futile attempts to calm the massive animal. They tried everything: fresh water, choice fodder, even burning sweetgrass, whose smoke typically soothed wild horses. Nothing penetrated the bull's agitation. Its movements grew increasingly frenzied as the morning progressed, its massive head swinging in violent arcs, foam flecking its muzzle. Most troubling were its eyes. No longer merely bright, they now seemed to glow from within a coppery luminescence that reminded Gózhŭ of embers smoldering beneath ash. When the animal's gaze swept across the village, several observers made protective signs against evil. "It should be killed," Kasa said quietly, appearing beside Gózhŭ's chair with her gathering basket in hand. "Whatever inhabits that creature is not natural." "Death might release something worse," Gózhŭ replied. "If it carries Ashki's curse, destroying the vessel could unleash the malice without direction." Kasa nodded gravely. "You have always understood the ways of spirit better than most warriors. What does your heart tell you about this danger?" Before he could answer, Tarak approached, 5 young hunters at his back. Their expressions conveyed a mixture of determination and thinly veiled excitement, the look of men seeking to prove themselves through confronting danger. "We will subdue the animal," Tarak announced, loud enough for nearby villagers to hear. "With ropes and skill, we'll demonstrate proper handling." "That would be unwise," Gózhŭ said evenly. "The bull is not merely untamed, it is influenced by forces beyond physical strength." Tarak's face hardened. "More spirit stories? We need action, not superstition." He turned to his companions. "Prepare the ropes. We begin at midday, when the sun is strongest and spirits, if they exist, are weakest." As the young men departed, Kasa shook her head. "Foolishness. His father should restrain him. The chief walks a difficult path," Gózhŭ observed. "He must balance tradition with new ways, respect for elders with empowering youth, and Tarak is his only son." Throughout the morning, Gózhŭ wheeled himself between his dwelling and the bull pen, watching as the animal's behavior grew increasingly erratic. It would stand motionless for long periods, staring fixedly toward the mountains, then suddenly erupt into violence, charging the pen walls with force that made the new reinforcements groan. Most villagers gave the enclosure wide berth, but Gózhŭ felt drawn closer, compelled by both concern and curiosity. During one of the bull's still phases, he approached within a few feet of the outer barrier. The animal's massive head swung toward him, nostrils flaring, for a moment that stretched like eternity. Man and beast regarded each other in silent communion. Gózhŭ did not flinch from the unnatural gaze. Instead, he reached into his spirit, projecting calm toward the troubled creature. A subtle change came over the bull. Its breathing slowed. The tension in its powerful shoulders eased slightly. Then, as if from great distance, Gózhŭ heard whispered words carried on no physical breeze. "She who will be again, ... blood answers blood." The voice was neither human nor animal, but something between ancient and malevolent. Gózhŭ recognized the cadence of old Navajo curse language, confirming his suspicions about Ashki's involvement. The connection broke when Tarak and his companions arrived with coiled ropes and determined expressions. The bull immediately resumed its agitated state, pawing the ground and lowering its horns toward the young warriors. "Step back, grandfather," Tarak commanded. "This is work for strong arms. Strength will avail you nothing against cursed flesh," Gózhŭ warned. "Ashki has bound a vengeful spirit to this animal." I heard its voice. Several of Tarak's companions exchanged uneasy glances, but their leader scoffed. "Convenient that only you can hear these spirits." Perhaps they exist merely in your thoughts. Not thoughts, came Nijoni's voice as she approached. Dreams. Tell them of your dreams, husband. Reluctantly, aware of the skepticism on Tarak's face, Gózhŭ recounted his vision of eagles transforming into the bull and the message to embrace what others fled. Dreams are for sleeping mats, not daylight decisions, Tarak dismissed. We act now, with methods proven by generations of hunters. As the young men spread out to position themselves around the pen, the sky darkened. Prematurely, thick clouds gathered overhead, though the morning had dawned clear. A cold wind gusted through the village, carrying the scent of rain and something else, a sharp, metallic tongue like blood. Tarak's attempt to subdue the bull had ended in humiliation and near tragedy. Despite their skill with rope and numbers, the young warriors had been outmatched by the animal's supernatural strength and cunning. 2 men suffered broken arms when the bull charged through their carefully laid trap as if the ropes were spider silk. Only quick action by Chief Nantai ordering everyone from the pen area prevented worse injuries. As night fell, an uneasy quiet settled over the village. The bull had finally exhausted itself, though occasional snorts and scrapes against earth indicated its rest was temporary. Most villagers retreated early to their dwellings, doors secured against both the coming storm and the malevolent presence they could feel taking root in their community. In his dwelling, Gózhŭ sat before a small ceremonial fire, his medicine bundle open beside him. The leather pouch contained objects gathered throughout his lifetime, items of personal power and spiritual significance. An eagle feather from his first vision quest as a youth. A smooth river stone carried from ancestral lands during the tribes. Migration generations ago. A small clay figurine of a bear, crafted by his father's hands. Dried herbs wrapped in bark cloth, collected under specific moons for cleansing and protection. Will you tell me what you plan? Nijoni asked, settling, cross-legged beside him. In the firelight, the silver in her hair gleamed like stars. When I know myself, he answered honestly. The path reveals itself one step at a time. After his wife had retired to their sleeping mats, Gózhŭ continued his vigil. He sprinkled sacred herbs onto the coals, inhaling the sharp, cleansing aroma that helped open the doorway between physical and spirit realms. As smoke curled upward, he closed his eyes and began the breathing pattern taught by his grandfather 4 counts in, hold for 7, release for 8. The vision came with startling clarity, no gradual transition from wakefulness to dream state, but an immediate transportation to sun-drenched highlands. He stood upright, his legs strong beneath him, on a mesa overlooking the village. Circling above, 3 eagles rode thermal currents, their shadows crossing his face in rhythmic intervals. Why have you brought me here? He asked the empty air, knowing somehow he would be answered. To see what must be seen, replied the wind itself, its voice neither male nor female, but containing elements of both. To understand what must be done. The eagles descended in perfect unison, transforming as they approached not into the bull of previous dreams, but into 3 human figures: an old man, a woman in her prime, and a small child. All 3 bore the same eyes, ancient, knowing, filled with both compassion and unbending purpose. The enemy has bound hatred to flesh, said the elder, his voice creaking like old leather. Hatred cannot be defeated by hatred, continued the woman, her tone melodious yet firm. Only embrace can dissolve boundaries, completed the child, with unsettling adult wisdom. You speak in riddles, Gózhŭ protested. My people face immediate danger. Not riddles, corrected the elder. Truths too simple for complicated minds. 3 figures gestured toward the village below, and Gózhŭ's vision zoomed like a diving hook. He saw the bull's pen, saw the animal pacing, saw something clinging to it, a shadowy form resembling Ashki, arms wrapped around the bull's massive neck, mouth at its ear, whispering constant words of rage and destruction. "The curse feeds on fear," explained the woman. "It grows stronger with each frightened heart. Then how can it be stopped?" Gózhŭ demanded. "How can I help when I cannot even walk?" The child approached, placing a small hand on Gózhŭ's chest. "Your strength was never in your legs, steady heart. Your power lies here and here." The child touched his forehead. "The vessel of hatred can be transformed by the vessel of compassion." Before Gózhŭ could ask for clearer instruction, the vision blurred. The three figures resumed eagle form, circling once more before flying toward the sun with a final message that echoed in his consciousness. Embrace what others flee. Only surrender conquers hatred's curse. Gózhŭ awoke with a gasp, the fire before him reduced to embers. Outside, thunder rumbled closer, and rain began to patter against the dwelling's hide covering. Dawn remained hours away, yet he felt compelled to action. Carefully repackaging his medicine bundle, he strapped it to his waist and maneuvered himself into his wheeled chair. The village pathways were deserted and slick with rainfall as he made his way to Kasa's dwelling. Despite the late hour, light glowed from within the medicine woman, often worked through night hours when spirits were most communicative. "I expected you," she said simply when he announced himself at her door. "The eagles are insistent tonight." Dawn arrived shrouded in storm clouds that hung low over the village, their underbellies the color of bruised flesh. The air felt charged, dense with moisture and the promise of violence. From her dwelling, Kasa emerged with Gózhŭ, both bearing the solemn expressions of those who had glimpsed unwelcome truths in the night hours. Between them sat an ancient ceremonial drum, its hide surface worn smooth by generations of hands, its wooden frame darkened with age and sacred oils. Kasa's grandfather had carried it during the tribe's great migration decades earlier, and its rhythms were said to speak directly to the spirit world. "We must prepare the village," Kasa announced to those already gathered in the growing light. "The storm approaches on many levels." Chief Nantai emerged from his dwelling, his face lined with concern. He had aged visibly since the bull's arrival just days before. "What preparations do you suggest, medicine woman?" Before Kasa could respond, a sound like tearing earth emanated from the bullpen. The massive animal had begun another assault on its enclosure, this time with methodical determination rather than blind rage. Each impact corresponded with a distant thunder rumble, as if nature itself echoed the beast's efforts. "The barriers will not hold much longer," Gózhŭ observed quietly. "The curse gains strength from the coming storm." Whispers spread through the gathering crowd. After yesterday's failed attempt to subdue the animal, even the most skeptical villagers had begun to accept that something unnatural influenced the bull. Mothers clutched children closer. Elders exchanged knowing glances. "We should kill it now," Tarek declared, his arm bound in a sling from yesterday's injury, but his voice still commanding. "Before it breaks free, death will not stop what drives it," Kasa warned. "The malice will simply find another vessel, perhaps one already within our village." The implications of her words, that someone among them might become possessed by Ashki's curse, sent a new wave of fear through the assembly. Neighbors regarded one another with sudden suspicion. "Enough," Chief Nantai commanded. "Fear divides. Us when we most need unity." He turned to Gózhŭ and Kasa. "What does wisdom counsel?" Kasa lifted the ceremonial drum, its surface catching what little light filtered through the storm clouds. "We will strengthen our spiritual barriers while reinforcing physical ones. Every dwelling must display protective symbols. Every hearth must burn purifying herbs." As villagers dispersed to follow her instructions, Gózhŭ wheeled himself toward the bull pen, drawn by an intuition he could neither explain nor resist. Chief Nantai and several warriors followed at a cautious distance. The enclosure looked smaller somehow, diminished by the massive creature it contained. The bull paced methodically, each footfall deliberate, testing different sections of the barrier. Most disturbing was its apparent intelligence. This was no mindless rampage, but a calculated search for weakness. When it noticed Gózhå's approach, the bull grew still, its unnatural eyes fixing on him with disturbing intensity. For a brief moment, something like recognition flickered across its features. "It knows you," Chief Nantai observed, his voice hushed. "Not me," Gózhå corrected. "It recognizes something in me that threatens the hatred binding it." The bull resumed its assault on the pen with renewed vigor, focusing now on a section directly facing Gózhå. Each impact made the reinforced posts tremble in the earth. From somewhere in the village, Kasa began a rhythmic drumming, slow, steady beats that seemed to vibrate through the ground itself. Some of the tension visibly left the bull's massive frame, though its gaze remained locked on Gózhå. "The drum speaks to the bull's true nature beneath the curse," Gózhå explained to the chief. "But it offers only temporary relief." As the morning progressed, storm clouds continued to gather. The air grew heavy with impending rainfall, and a sharp wind gusted through the village, carrying dust and debris. Children were kept close to dwellings, daily activities suspended as the community prepared for whatever was coming. Gózhå returned to his home to find Nijoni placing protective symbols of ochre and charcoal above their doorway. Her movements were precise, practiced. She had weathered many crises at her husband's side over their decades together. "You have decided something," she said without turning, knowing him too well to miss the subtle shift in his demeanor. "Yes," he acknowledged. "When the bull breaks free, and it will, I must meet it." Nijoni's hand paused mid-symbol. "To what end, husband?" "To embrace what others flee," he answered, the eagle spirit's words coming naturally to his lips. "The curse feeds on fear, and can only be transformed through its opposite." She turned then, eyes bright with unshed tears. "You asked me to accept your sacrifice." "I ask you to trust my vision," he corrected gently, "as you have trusted me through all our seasons together." The first heavy raindrops struck the dwelling's roof as thunder crashed directly overhead. From the direction of the bull pen came the sound of splintering wood and alarmed shouts. The final barrier fell with a sound like thunder itself wood splintering, rawhide bindings snapping, the triumphant bellow of the bull merging with panicked shouts across the village. Rain fell in blinding sheets as the massive animal burst into freedom, its dark form barely visible through the downpour, except when lightning flashed overhead, illuminating its massive silhouette in stark relief. Frayed length of rope still clung to the bull's neck, whipping behind it like a serpent as the beast charged toward the nearest dwellings. Its hooves threw mud in great arcs. Its breath came in steam-like bursts in the suddenly cold air. Most terrifying were its eyes, no longer merely unnatural. They now blazed with what appeared to be actual flames, twin points of fire that left faint trails in the gloom to the high ground. Chief Nantai's voice carried despite the storm's fury. "All who cannot fight seek shelter in the caves." Villagers who had been bracing for this moment nonetheless found themselves frozen briefly in terror before self-preservation propelled them into action. Mothers gathered children, elders were helped by younger family members, precious possessions abandoned in the rush to safety. Years of drills for raids and natural disasters served them well, now despite the chaos. Their evacuation proceeded with relative order. Tarak and 7 warriors formed a defensive line, armed with spears and shields. Their faces betrayed their fear, but their postures remained resolute descendants of generations of Apache, defenders who had faced enemies both human and natural. "Spread out," Tarak commanded. "Force it away from the evacuation path." Their bravery, while admirable, proved futile against the bull's focused rage. It charged straight through their formation, sending men flying like dry leaves in a windstorm. One spear managed to graze its flank, drawing a thin line of blood that steamed oddly in the rain. But the wound only seemed to fuel its fury rather than slow its advance. From his position near their dwelling, Gózhŭ watched the unfolding. Disaster with grim resolve. His decision had been made during the night vigil with Kasa, confirmed through prayer at dawn. Now, as rain soaked through his buckskin shirt and thunder shook the ground beneath his wheeled chair, he made final preparations. "You should join the others in the caves," he told Nizhoni, who stood resolutely beside him, helping to secure special items to his person, the eagle feather tucked into his hair, the medicine bundle at his waist, sacred ochre symbols painted on his chest beneath his clothing. "When have I ever left your side in danger?" she replied, her voice steady despite the tears mingling with raindrops on her face. "I will see this through, then join the others if I must." The bull had reached the village center now, destroying everything in its path. It trampled cooking pits, scattered storage containers, demolished a small ceremonial structure. Yet its rampage was not random. Gózhŭ observed how it consistently turned toward the evacuation route, as if deliberately trying to intercept the fleeing villagers. "It hunts the vulnerable," he murmured. "The curse seeks maximum fear." With quiet determination, he instructed Nizhoni to wheel him into the plaza, the open area where tribal ceremonies were normally conducted, now a churned expanse of mud and debris. Positioning himself in the most visible location, he nodded for his wife to leave him. "I cannot," she whispered, hands white-knuckled on the chair handles. "You must," he replied gently. "What comes next is between the spirit world and me. Your presence would divide my focus when I need it whole." For a moment she remained unmoving, then bent to place a fierce kiss upon his weathered cheek. "Return to me, steady art," she commanded rather than pleaded, using his warrior name with deliberate significance. "I will try," was all he could honestly promise. As Nizhoni reluctantly retreated toward the evacuation path, Gózhŭ raised his face to the storm. Rain washed over his features, cleansing and purifying. Lightning etched itself across the sky in complex patterns that reminded him of the symbols in his vision. In that moment of connection between earth and sky, he felt an unusual sensation warmth, spreading through his body, centering in his useless legs. Not restoration, but recognition, as if his entire being, broken and whole parts alike, were being acknowledged by powers beyond human understanding. The bull had completed its circuit of destruction and now stood at the far end of the plaza, having somehow sensed Gózhŭ's presence. Steam rose from its hide as rain struck its supernaturally heated body. The flames in its eyes intensified, focusing on the solitary figure in the wheeled chair. From hidden vantage points around the plaza perimeter, those villagers who had not yet evacuated watched in horrified fascination. Among them, Tarak nursed a bloodied arm, his earlier bravado replaced by grim acknowledgement that conventional weapons had proven useless. Chief Nantai stood with Kasa at the path entrance, torn between leadership duty to join the evacuation and personal desire to witness what would unfold. "The old warrior has more courage than I credit in," Tarak admitted quietly to those near him. The bull pawed the muddy ground, lowered its massive head, and with a bellow that seemed to contain words just beyond human comprehension, began its charge across the plaza. Time seemed to slow as the bull charged across the plaza, each hoofbeat distinct despite the storm's fury. Mud flew in dark arcs from its pounding feet, steam billowed from its nostrils, and those flame-like eyes fixed unwaveringly on Gózhŭ with malevolent intelligence. Alone in his wooden wheelchair, alone, gift crafted by his brother after the accident, its wheels and frame worn smooth by 15 years of use, Gózhŭ felt a strange calm descend. Fear remained, certainly. Only a fool feels no fear when facing death. But beneath that natural emotion flowed something deeper, a current of purpose that had been missing from his life since the day his legs betrayed him. Lightning flashed overhead, illuminating the plaza in harsh white light. In that instant, Gózhŭ saw not just the physical bull charging toward him, but the spiritual overlay, the shadowy form of Ashi clinging to the animal, his spectral mouth pressed close to its ear, whispering hatred and destruction. The shaman's spirit form looked directly at Gózhŭ and sneered in recognition. "So it is truly you," Gózhŭ whispered. "After all these years." Memories cascaded through his mind, his younger self sparing Aski during the raid, choosing mercy over vengeance in accordance with his personal code. That mercy, meant as respect for a worthy opponent, had festered in Ashki's spirit as humiliation. Now, too old for physical confrontation, the shaman had found another way to exact revenge. Asterisk. "Your hatred has consumed you more than it has harmed me," Gózhŭ said to the approaching apparition, words carried away by wind and rain, yet somehow felt in the spiritual realm. The bull was halfway across the plaza now, gathering speed despite the muddy ground. 60 paces away. 50. Its bulk seemed to grow with proximity, shoulders massive, horns gleaming like wet obsidian in the stormlight. Gózhŭ closed his eyes briefly, centering himself in prayer. When he opened them, he imagined he saw an eagle circling above, despite the storm impossible, yet undeniably present in his perception. From that spiritual presence came a wordless reassurance, a reminder that this moment had been years in preparation. His paralysis, his diminished status in the tribe, his increased spiritual sensitivity, all had led to this encounter. 40 paces. 30. The ground trembled beneath his chair. With deliberate movements, Gózhŭ began to shift his weight, preparing to attempt what he had not done in 15 years, to stand. His useless legs had atrophied over the years, becoming thin shadows of the powerful limbs that had once carried him across mountains and deserts. Yet something told him that physical strength would not be the deciding factor in what was to come. Embrace what others flee, he reminded himself, the eagle spirit's words becoming his mantra. 20 paces. The bull's breath was visible now, great clouds of steam erupting with each exhalation. Its eyes fixed on him with hate that transcended animal consciousness, Ashki's hatred, using the beast as vessel and weapon. Bracing his hands on the wheelchair's arms, Gózhŭ summoned every fragment of strength remaining in his body. With supreme effort, he pushed upward, legs trembling violently beneath him. For a heartbeat, he thought he would fail, that his body's limitations would prove insurmountable, despite his spirit's determination. Then, impossibly, he felt himself rising. Not fully standing, his legs could never support that, but lifting. From the chair nonetheless, his upper body strength compensating for lower weakness. By the time the bull closed to 15 paces, Gózhŭ had achieved a half-standing position, balanced precariously between collapse and transcendence. From hidden positions around the plaza, those watching gasped at the sight of the paralyzed elder partially rising from his chair. Even knowing the danger, several unconsciously stepped from concealment, drawn by the power of the moment. The bull faltered briefly, seemingly confused by this unexpected development. The flames in its eyes flickered, the shadowy form of Ashki, visibly tightening its grip on the animal spirit. After that momentary hesitation, the charge resumed with even greater fury, as if the curse recognized a genuine threat and sought to eliminate it quickly. 10 paces. Gózhŭ's arms opened wide, palms facing outward in a gesture of welcome rather than defense. His face showed neither fear nor defiance, but something far more dangerous to hatred-compassion. "I see you, brother," he called out, addressing not the bull, but the spirit driving it. "I see your pain." 5 paces. The bull lowered its head, massive horns aimed directly at Gózhŭ's chest. Death seemed certain to all who watched. Yet the old warrior remained steady, arms extended, eyes clear. In the heartbeat before impact, A single eagle feather dislodged from Gózhő's hair by the wind floated down between man and beast. As it crossed the bull's line of sight, time itself seemed to pause. The feather hung suspended in air, neither rising nor falling, a bridge between physical and spiritual realms. One pace remained between Gózhõ and the bull, one final moment before collision. When the old warrior spoke his last words before impact, "I embrace your hatred, that it might find peace in me." Impact came with less force than expected, as if some invisible buffer had absorbed the bull's momentum in that final instant. Instead of the deadly collision all witnesses anticipated, Gózhõ found himself pressed against the animal's massive shoulder, his arms somehow encircling the thick neck, fingers clutching damp fur as the beast's forward motion carried them. Both several feet across the muddy plaza. The wheelchair toppled sideways, wheels spinning uselessly in air. Gózhő's useless legs dragged beneath him, yet somehow he maintained his grip, face pressed against the bull's heaving flank. Heat radiated from the animal, not natural warmth, but the burning fever of curse-fueled rage. "I am here," Gózhõ whispered against the creature's hide. "I am with you in this suffering." The bull stood frozen, seemingly stunned by the embrace, rather than resistance. Its sides heaved with labored breathing, muscles trembling beneath Gózhő's touch. The flames in its eyes flickered, dimming then flaring, as if battling unseen winds. Rain continued to pour around them, but directly overhead, the storm clouds began to part, creating a perfect circle of clear sky through which sunlight suddenly streamed. This impossible shaft of light illuminated man and beast in golden radiance, steam rising from their joined forms to create a misty halo effect. Single eagle feather, the one that had fallen between them moments before now, drifted down from above, landing softly on Gózhő's shoulder. Where it touched, a subtle glow spread, visible only to those with spiritual sensitivity. Casa, watching from the plaza's edge, fell to her knees at the sight. "Brother," Gózhõ continued, his voice gaining strength despite his precarious position, "your hatred has bound you as surely as it binds this innocent creature. Let me carry it for a while, that you both might rest." With those words, something extraordinary began to happen. The shadowy form of HUGGED, visible now to all with eyes to see, writhed upon the bull's back as if in agony. Its spiritual hands, previously clutching the animal with parasitic intensity, began to loosen their grip. No, the voice was not physical, but vibrated through the spiritual realm, causing those with medicine sensitivity to wince. "My vengeance is justified, my hatred earned." "Yes," Gózhõ agreed calmly. "Your anger has cause. Your pain is real. I acknowledge this truth." This simple validation, so different from the resistance HUGGED's spirit had expected, caused visible confusion in the spectral form. The bull, sensing the shift, gave a great shudder, but made no move to attack Gózhõ, who maintained his embrace despite his awkward position. "Then why do you interfere?" demanded the spirit voice, weaker now, but still defiant. "Because your suffering brings you no peace," Gózhõ answered. "Because hatred consumes the vessel that carries it. Look what has become of your spirit, brother. Is this what you wished for yourself when we were young men?" For a moment, the shadow form seemed to flicker between rage and uncertainty. In that instant of vulnerability, Gózhõ tightened his embrace around the bull's neck, pressing his cheek against the animal's hide with genuine compassion. "I forgive you," he said simply, "and I ask your forgiveness for the humiliation my mercy caused you." A keening sound like wind through canyon walls emanated from the spirit form. The bull's legs buckled slightly, as if a great weight were shifting. Above them, a circle of clear sky widened, sunlight strengthening despite the storm that continued around its edges. Then, with shocking suddenness, the bull sank to its front knees in the mud. The movement might have dislodged Gózhõ, but strong hands appeared to support him. Nijoni had rushed forward from her hiding place, Defying danger to steady her husband out as the bull knelt, something astonishing became visible to all watching. From its unnatural eyes, those burning coals of hatred fell what could only be described as tears. Great crystalline drops that steamed where they struck the earth, as if the very essence of the curse was being purged through this unexpected emotional release. The shadowy form of Ashki wavered, becoming increasingly transparent. His spiritual hands no longer clutched the bull, but hovered uncertainly above it. His face, previously contorted with malice, now showed confusion, then something approaching wonder. How? The spirit voice had become a whisper. Hatred cannot survive when met with its opposite, Gózhŭ explained gently. Fire needs fuel to burn. When you find only forgiveness where you expected fear, the flames must eventually die. As if in response to these words, the unnatural fire in the bull's eyes flickered one last time, then faded entirely, leaving behind dark, liquid orbs that gazed at Gózhŭ with what could only be described as gratitude. The massive animal lowered its head completely, touching its muzzle to the earth in a gesture of submission and relief. Silence descended upon the plaza, broken only by the gradually diminishing rainfall. The storm that had raged with supernatural fury now gentled to a soft patter, clouds thinning as sunlight strengthened through the circular opening overhead. Steam rose from the mud as warmth touched cold earth, creating a misty veil through which the kneeling bull and the paralyzed warrior peered almost mythical. Gózhŭ, still supported by Nijoni's steady hands, maintained his embrace around the massive animal's neck. The bull's breathing had slowed from desperate heaving to deep, regular inhalations. With each breath, a visible change spread across its form muscles. Relaxing, stance softening, the unnatural tension melting away like ice under spring sunshine. Most remarkable were its eyes. The fiery rage that had burned within them had vanished completely, replaced by a liquid brown gaze that held unmistakable awareness. These were not the eyes of a simple beast, but of a creature touched by spiritual awakening. Actual tears continued to stream from these transformed eyes, creating small rivulets through the mud beneath its massive head. The shadowy form of Ashki had become so transparent as to be nearly invisible, clinging to the bull's form by the merest spiritual threads. His expression had transformed from hatred to something approaching wonder, perhaps even envy, at witnessing power greater than his malice. How did you know? The spirit voice was barely audible now, a whisper only Gózhŭ and those with medicine sensitivity could perceive. I didn't know, Gózhŭ admitted. I trusted. With those simple words, the last threads binding Ashki's spirit to the bull dissolved. The shadowy form hesitated a moment longer, not yet ready for whatever journey awaited it. Beyond this realm then dispersed, like morning mist, neither banished nor defeated, but simply released. The bull shuddered once as the curse's final grip loosened, then grew still beneath Gózhŭ's touch. For a long moment, man and beast remained motionless in their tableau of reconciliation. Tentatively, villagers began to emerge from hiding places around the plaza. Their expressions reflected disbelief, awe, and the cautious rekindling of hope. Chief Nantai approached first, his leadership position demanding that he assess the situation before others ventured closer. Is it safe? He asked, stopping several paces away. Yes, Gózhŭ answered with quiet certainty. The curse is broken. As if understanding these words, the bull slowly raised its head. Those watching tensed, ready to flee if the rage returned. Instead, the animal gently pressed its muzzle against Gózhŭ's chest in a gesture strikingly similar to how a loyal dog might greet a beloved master. Impossible, whispered Tarak, limping forward with his injured arm cradled against his chest. The young warrior's earlier arrogance had been replaced by stunned humility. No wild bull behaves thus. It is no longer wild, Kasa explained, her medicine woman's insight perceiving truths others missed. Nor is it merely a bull anymore. Spirit has awakened within it. More villagers gathered as word spread that the danger had passed. Children, naturally less burdened by disbelief than adults, were the first to approach the unlikely pair in the plaza's center. One small girl, Talyuta, who had often begged Gózhǫ for stories, darted forward before her mother could restrain her. "Grandfather," she called, "is this your new friend?" The innocent question broke the spell of solemnity that had held the adults motionless. A ripple of relieved laughter spread through the gathering crowd. Gózhǫ smiled, beckoning the child. Closer with a nod. "Yes, little one, I believe it is." Talyuta approached without fear, reaching out to touch the bull's massive shoulder. The animal turned its head slightly to regard her, then lowered its muzzle to gently snuffle her hair. The child giggled, and something in that pure sound seemed to complete the transformation. The last vestiges of unnatural presence faded from the bull's form, leaving behind an animal that, while still imposing in size and strength, now radiated calm rather than menace. Other children followed Talyuta's lead, approaching to touch the bull's hide with wondering fingers. Adults remained more cautious, but their fear visibly diminished as they witnessed the creature's gentle interactions with their young. Nantai finally stepped forward to stand before Gózhŭ, who remained partially supported by Nishoni, unable to return to his overturned wheelchair without assistance. "In all my years," the chief said softly, "I have never witnessed such courage, or such wisdom." Tarak moved to his father's side, his expression complex pride struggling with humility, respect battling wounded ego. After a moment's hesitation, he extended his uninjured arm toward Gózhŭ in the traditional warrior's salute. "I was wrong," he acknowledged simply. "Strength wears many faces indeed." As the sun fully emerged from the dispersing storm clouds, its light fell unfiltered upon the plaza. The muddy ground, trampled by panic and violence moments before, now held the first footprints of a gathering community, a circle forming naturally around the old warrior and the transformed bull, whose tears had finally ceased, replaced by a tranquil gaze that seemed to hold wisdom beyond animal understanding. By late afternoon, word of the miracle had spread beyond those who witnessed it firsthand. Villagers who had fled to the caves returned cautiously, expecting to find destruction and possibly death. Instead, they discovered a community transformed, almost as profoundly as the bull itself. The plaza had become an impromptu gathering place. Women brought food from undamaged dwellings, children played in mud puddles under the now clear sky, and elders sat in a loose circle, sharing interpretations of what had transpired. At the center of this activity, yet somehow set apart by a respectful distance, sat Gózhŭ in a newly constructed wheelchair, his old one having been trampled beyond repair during the confrontation. The bull remained near him, lying peacefully on the ground, occasionally raising its massive head to observe the activity around them. Most remarkable was how the children had adopted the creature, clambering over its broad back without fear, braiding small flowers into its tail, treating it as a benevolent presence rather than the engine of destruction it had been mere hours before. "They've named it Thunderheart," Nishoni told her husband with quiet amusement, setting a bowl of stew beside him, "for the sound it made when charging, and for how it knelt before your steady heart." Gózhŭ smiled, watching a particularly bold 6-year-old boy balancing atop the bull's shoulders, holding makeshift reins fashioned from woven grass. The animal bore this treatment with remarkable patience, as if understanding its role in this new chapter of village life. Chief Nantai approached, carrying his ceremonial staff, a gnarled length of lightning-struck pine adorned with eagle feathers, and copper bangles that marked generational leadership. The crowd quieted as he stopped before Gózhŭ, awareness spreading that something significant was about to occur. "When I became chief," Nantai began, his voice carrying across the plaza, My father told me leadership is not about having all answers, but about recognizing wisdom when it appears before you. He paused, looking around at the gathered villagers. Today, wisdom and courage appeared in a form many of us had forgotten to honor. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. Several elders nodded emphatically, while younger warriors, Tarak among them, lowered their eyes in acknowledgment of their previous dismissiveness. "The council fire has missed your voice, Gózhŭ," the chief continued, extending his staff until its end rested lightly against the seated man's shoulder. "I ask that you return to your rightful place among our decision-makers." A formal invitation, publicly offered, to rejoin the tribal council. The significance was lost on no one present. For 15 years, Gózhŭ had been gradually marginalized, his physical limitations mistaken for diminished value. Now, in one gesture, the chief restored his standing before the entire community. "I accept with gratitude," Gózhŭ replied simply. "My voice remains in service to our people." Kasa stepped forward then, her medicine woman's authority lending additional weight to the moment. "What we witnessed today fulfills the ancient prophecy of the broken vessel," she announced. "Our stories tell of one who would be shattered dead. He might hold greater wisdom, whose surrender would overcome what resistance could not defeat." This revelation caused a stir among the elders, who exchanged significant glances. The prophecy was known to few, preserved in oral tradition passed only to those with medicine responsibilities. That Gózhŭ's actions, aligned with this ancient prediction, added spiritual validation to an already powerful event. As the afternoon progressed into evening, other subtle but meaningful shifts became apparent throughout the village. Warriors, who had previously acknowledged Gózhŭ with distant respect, now approached to ask direct questions about his experience. Young mothers brought children for his blessing, a honor previously reserved for the most esteemed elders. Even Tarak, still nursing his injured arm, came to sit quietly nearby, listening as Gózhŭ explained his understanding of the day's events to a growing circle of attentive listeners. Most telling was how news began to spread beyond their immediate community. By sunset, representatives from 2 neighboring Apache bands had arrived, drawn by reports carried by runners about strange lights seen above the village and a miraculous confrontation between man and beast. They brought gifts and requests to hear the story directly from witnesses. "This will not be the last," predicted an elder named Hanska, whose trading connections extended to distant tribes. "Word of power travels faster than feet can carry it. Many will come seeking understanding." As stars appeared overhead, a sense of celebration gradually replaced the earlier tension. A feast was prepared from communal stores. Drums were brought forth, and songs long unsung filled the night air. The bull-lao, universally called Thunderheart, remained beside Gózhŭ, occasionally accepting offered tidbits from children's hands with surprising delicacy for such a massive creature. During a momentary lull in the festivities, Nijoni leaned close to her husband's ear. "Does it trouble you," she asked softly, "that they honor you now, when many ignored your wisdom before today?" Gózhŭ considered the question carefully before answering. "People recognize truth at different times and different ways," he replied. "The eagle does not resent the rabbit for having different eyes." Across the firelight, Chief Nantai raised his hand, requesting Gózhŭ's presence in a discussion with the visiting representatives. As Nijoni wheeled him toward this new responsibility, the transformed bull rose to follow, its place at the old warrior's side, now seemingly permanent, a living reminder of how completely hatred had been transformed through the power of a single courageous embrace. Dawn brought activity to the village boundaries as scouts returned from overnight surveillance of the surrounding territory. Their expressions were grim as they approached Chief Nantai, who had been consulting with Gózhŭ and other elders about repairs to damaged structures. "We found tracks," reported Nakia, the lead scout whose tracking abilities were legendary, "among neighboring tribes. 5 men approached our western border 2 nights ago, remained hidden until yesterday's storm, then fled during the chaos. Ashki? Chief Nantai asked, though the answer seemed obvious to all present. Makya nodded. His distinctive walking stick left marks near a hidden observation point, overlooking the bull pen. He watched while the others maintained distance. This confirmation of external involvement brought murmurs from the gathered council. While many had accepted the spiritual nature of the previous day's events, physical evidence of Ashki's presence made the danger more tangible and potentially ongoing. There is more, Makya continued, producing a small deerskin pouch from his belt. With careful movements, he emptied its contents onto a flat stone. We found this buried beneath the exact spot where the bull pen was constructed. The object that tumbled forth caused Gózhŭ to inhale sharply. It was a small carving of a bull, crafted from black stone, its surface covered with intricate symbols in red ochre. Most disturbing was the condition of the artifact. It had split nearly in half, the break fresh and clean, as if it had shattered at the precise moment the curse was broken. A binding token, Gózhŭ confirmed, leaning close but not touching the object. Powerful medicine. This explains how Ashki controlled the bull from a distance. Gózhŭ studied the broken carving with somber interest. The trader who brought the bull must have been Ashki's unwitting accomplice, or perhaps coerced. The animal was likely selected for its unusual size and strength, then prepared with preliminary rituals before being delivered to us. A calculated attack, Chief Nantai concluded, designed to appear as a natural disaster rather than deliberate aggression. Tarek, who had joined the council at his father's request, clenched his jaw. This demands response. We cannot allow such treachery to go unanswered. A tense silence followed his words. Traditionally, such a spiritual attack would indeed warrant retaliation. The tribe's warriors shifted restlessly, many clearly agreeing with Tarek's sentiment. Before the chief could respond, Thunderheart, who had been lying peacefully near Gózhŭ's chair, suddenly rose to its feet. The massive bull approached. The broken token sniffed it once, then deliberately placed a hoof upon the fragments, grinding them further into dust with a deliberate movement that seemed too purposeful to be coincidental. The bull remembers its bondage, Gózhŭ observed, quietly, and chooses destruction of the instrument rather than revenge against its user. A symbolism was lost on no one present. Thunderheart had demonstrated a more elevated response than many warriors were contemplating. Wisdom from an unexpected quarter, Chief Nantai acknowledged with a slight nod toward the animal. He turned to address the gathering. Double the scouts along our boundaries. Prepare defensive positions, but make no offensive movements. If Ashki returns, we will be ready, but we will not become the aggressors he wishes us to be. As the council dispersed to implement these orders, Gózhŭ wheeled himself toward his dwelling, Thunderheart following like a massive shadow. Nijoni waited at their doorway, having already begun repairs to damage caused by the previous days. Storm, they found evidence of Ashki's involvement. Gózhŭ informed her as she helped him over the threshold. A binding token beneath the bull pen. Nijoni's expression darkened. That old hatred still burns in him, even after all these years? She glanced at Thunderheart, who had settled outside their door as if standing guard. Though it seems to have backfired in ways he could not have anticipated. Hatred always consumes itself eventually, Gózhŭ replied, though rarely so dramatically. Throughout the day, villagers continued repairs while maintaining heightened vigilance. Children were kept closer to the central plaza. Hunting parties traveled in larger groups than usual, and signal fires were prepared on surrounding high points to warn of approaching danger. Yet, amid these preparations, another activity began. One that spoke to the community's deeper understanding of what had transpired. Women gathered materials to craft a new ceremonial drum, its design incorporating symbols representing Gózhő's embrace of the bull. Young men cleared ground for a special dance circle, where the confrontation would be reenacted during future gatherings. Elders began composing songs to preserve the story for generations to come. By late afternoon, a rider from a friendly neighboring band arrived with unexpected news. He had observed HUGGED and several followers traveling rapidly northward, away from both villages. They appeared frightened, the messenger reported. HUGGED especially seemed weakened, leaning heavily on two supporters. They carried minimal provisions, as if fleeing rather than traveling with purpose. This information brought thoughtful silence to the council. Gózhŭ, who had been contemplating the broken curse token and its implications, finally spoke. When the bull was freed from HUGGED's control, the backlash likely affected the shaman himself. Powerful curses, when broken, often rebound upon their creators. Then our enemy has defeated himself, Tarak suggested, a note of satisfaction in his voice. No, Gózhŭ corrected gently. Our enemy has been injured by his own actions, but defeat comes only when hatred itself is abandoned. Until HUGGED chooses a different path, the potential for future conflict remains. Chief Nantai nodded in agreement. We will maintain vigilance, but perhaps this experience has taught him the dangers of pursuing vengeance through spiritual means. As darkness fell, Thunderheart remained at Gózhŭ's side, occasionally turning its massive head toward the northern mountains where HUGGED had reportedly fled. In its now gentle eyes, a lingering awareness suggested the animal remembered its former controller, not with rage, but with something approaching pity. 3 days after the confrontation, while examining Tarak's injured arm, Gózhŭ discovered something extraordinary. As his weathered fingers gently probed the swollen flesh, assessing the damage before applying a poultice, he felt an unusual warmth spreading from his palms. Tarak's sharp intake of breath confirmed that the young warrior felt it too, a penetrating heat that somehow eased rather than increased the pain. What medicine is this? Tarak asked, watching with fascination as the angry red color visibly diminished beneath Gózhŭ's touch. I am not certain, Gózhŭ admitted, equally surprised by the effect. After completing the examination, he called for Kasa to witness what had occurred. The medicine woman arrived, carrying a clay bowl containing herbs steeped in hot water, a traditional remedy for inflammation. She set it aside, however, when she observed the changed condition of Tarak's injury. The swelling has reduced by half since morning, she noted, her experienced fingers confirming what her eyes perceived. And the bone alignment feels improved. At her request, Gózhŭ described the sensation he had experienced. Kasa listened intently, occasionally nodding as if confirming a suspicion. Place your hands on his arm again, she instructed. I wish to observe. As Gózhŭ complied, Kasa watched with the heightened perception of one attuned to spiritual energies. Her eyes widened slightly. There is a transfer occurring, she explained. A channel has opened between your spirit and his flesh. Word of this development spread quickly throughout the village. By midday, a small gathering had formed outside Gózhŭ's dwelling, people with various ailments, hoping to experience this healing touch for themselves. Thunderheart lay nearby, watchful and protective, allowing only those who approached with proper respect to come. Near Gózhŭ, an elderly woman with joints swollen from years of grinding corn found her pain noticeably reduced after Gózhŭ's hands rested briefly on her wrists. A young hunter whose old leg injury flared in cold weather felt warmth penetrate the damaged muscle, bringing flexibility he had thought permanently lost. A child with persistent stomach pains curled against Gózhŭ's chest and fell into peaceful sleep for the first time in days. Not all respond equally, Gózhŭ observed to Nijoni as evening approached and the last visitors departed. Exhaustion lined his face, the day's efforts having drained him in ways he hadn't anticipated. Some feel great improvement, others only slight change. Yet all come away with lighter spirits, his wife noted wisely. Healing takes many forms. As darkness fell, Kasa returned with Chief Nantai for a more private discussion of the day's events. They sat in a close circle within Gózhŭ's dwelling, speaking in the low tones reserved for matters of spiritual significance. In ancient stories, Kasa began, warriors who survived great spiritual battles sometimes emerged with new gifts. The greater the sacrifice faced, the more profound the ability granted. You believe my encounter with the cursed bull opened this healing? Channel? Gózhŭ asked. Kasa nodded. When you embraced what everyone else fled, you created a pathway between realms. Something flowed through you in that moment, something that transformed both the bull and yourself. Chief Nantai, who had been listening thoughtfully, posed the question others might hesitate to ask. Could this ability fade with time? Perhaps, Kasa acknowledged. Or it might strengthen with use. The spirit world gives no guarantees. Throughout this conversation, Thunderheart remained just outside the dwelling's entrance, its massive form visible through the doorway. The bull's presence had become a constant in Gózhŭ's life, following him throughout the village, waiting patiently during council meetings, sleeping beside his dwelling at night. Most remarkable was the animal's behavior toward children, who had taken to climbing upon its broad back for rides around the plaza. The once fearsome creature now carried its small passengers with gentle care, seeming to understand their fragility. The bull itself stands as the greatest evidence of transformation, Gózhŭ observed, gesturing toward Thunderheart. No natural animal behaves as it does now. Some believe, Kasa said carefully, that when Ashki's curse was broken, the bull retained a portion of human understanding, that in the moment of your embrace, something of your spirit transferred to it, just as something of its strength may have transferred to you. This theory sparked contemplative silence among them. The implications that spiritual essence could flow between human and animal challenged even traditional Apache beliefs about the separation between beings. Following day brought visitors from a village 2 days' journey away, an elderly couple who had traveled upon hearing rumors of healing. They brought their grandson, a boy of perhaps 7 winters who had not spoken since witnessing his parents' deaths during a flash flood the previous season. Gózhŭ spent time with the child, not immediately attempting to heal, but simply sharing space and quiet presence. Thunderheart seemed particularly drawn to the boy, gently nudging him with its massive head until the child hesitantly reached out to touch its muzzle dot as the boy's hand made contact with the bull. Gózhŭ placed his own hand lightly on the child's shoulder. The connection between the three created a visible ripple in the air, subtle but unmistakable to those with eyes to see. The boy gasped, then spoke his first word in months. Warm. By sunset, the child was forming complete sentences, describing, to his astonished grandparents, the sensation of light moving through the big animal, through the sitting man, and into me. As news of such healing spread, more visitors arrived daily. Some came seeking physical cures, others hoping for spiritual insight. All departed changed in some manner, though not always in the ways they had anticipated. 2 weeks of peace had lulled the village into a tentative sense of security. A daily rhythm had resumed hunters bringing game from the hills, women gathering autumn plants before winter's approach, children training in traditional skills under elder guidance. Gózhŭ's healing abilities had become integrated into this pattern, with regular hours set aside for those seeking his touch. Thunderheart remained his constant companion, the bull's massive presence now, a reassuring sight rather than cause for alarm. The first sign of trouble came not from scouts or sentries, but from Thunderheart itself. While Gózhŭ was treating an elderly man's persistent cough, the bull suddenly raised its head, nostrils flaring as it oriented toward the northern pass. A low, rumbling sound, not quite a bellow, but deeper than a growl, emanated from its broad chest. "What troubles him?" asked the patient, pulling away from Gózhå's healing hands, as Thunderheart's agitation grew more pronounced. Gózhå did not immediately answer, instead closing his eyes to focus on the connection he had developed with the animal. Through that silent channel came impressions, rather than words, a sense of approaching malice, the taste of bitter herbs associated with curse-making, the unmistakable spiritual signature of HUGGED. "Send for the chief," Gózhå instructed a nearby youth. "Tell him to meet me at the northern boundary." By the time Chief Nantai arrived with Tarak and several warriors, Gózhå had already discovered the cause of Thunderheart's alarm. Half buried in freshly disturbed earth at the village perimeter lay a distinctive arrow, its shaft painted with red and black spirals, its stone point coated with a substance that gave off a faint, noxious odor. "Poison," confirmed Kassa, who had joined them, carefully examining the arrow without touching it directly, but meant to deliver spiritual rather than physical toxins. "This is a message, not a failed attack." Tarak reached for the arrow, but Thunderheart interposed its massive body, preventing him from touching the contaminated object. The bull's behavior, increasingly deliberate and seemingly conscious, surprised even those who had grown accustomed to its unusual intelligence. "The animal senses danger we cannot," Chief Nantai observed. "Perhaps it retains knowledge of HUGGED's methods from its time under his influence." At Gózhå's suggestion, Kassa used 2 sticks to lift the arrow into a deerskin pouch, which was then secured for proper ritual disposal. As she completed this task, Thunderheart's attention shifted to the surrounding forest edge, its body language suggesting continued unease. "There may be other tokens," Gózhå warned. "The arrow could be a distraction from more significant placements." A thorough search of the village boundaries revealed 5 additional items, stones, carved with malevolent symbols. A bundle of feathers bound with human hair, a small clay figure pierced with thorns, and 2 pouches containing mixtures of dried substances that Kassa identified as components in advanced curse rituals. "HUGGED prepares something complex," she explained during an emergency council meeting that evening. "These items form a pattern around our village, the beginnings of a confinement working that would trap negative energies within our boundaries. Can such placements be neutralized?" asked an elder whose skepticism about spiritual matters had diminished considerably since the bull incident. Kassa nodded. "With proper ceremonies. But their presence confirms what many suspected HUGGED's retreat was tactical, not permanent. He gathers strength for another attempt." Throughout this discussion, Gózhå remained unusually quiet, his expression distant, as if listening to voices others could not hear. Thunderheart, positioned just outside the council circle, occasionally made soft sounds that seemed almost like language, though no human present could interpret them. "You perceive something more," Chief Nantai finally said directly to Gózhå, recognizing the signs of spiritual communication. "Dreams came last night," Gózhå acknowledged. "Eagle spirits returned with warnings. HUGGED gathers allies, not just from his own band, but from 3 others who bear grievances against us. They prepare not just spiritual assault, but physical attack." This revelation brought concerned murmurs from the council. While the village could defend against typical raiding parties, a coordinated assault from multiple bands would stretch their resources dangerously thin. "How much time do we have?" Tarak asked, his previous dismissal of Gózhå's spiritual insights entirely absent now. 3 days, perhaps 4, Gózhå answered. "The coming moon phase strengthens certain curse workings. It will likely coordinate their approach with its fullness." As the council discussed defensive preparations, positioning warriors, securing provisions, preparing evacuation routes for the vulnerable Thunderheart, grew increasingly restless. The bull paced the perimeter of the gathering, occasionally pausing to stare intently in the direction from which danger would come. He remembers, Gózhŭ explained when questioned about this behavior. The bull recalls being used as a weapon and recognizes the approaching threat as similar in nature. Before the council dispersed, one final discovery added urgency to their preparations. A young scout returned from the high ridge overlooking the northern approach, his expression grave as he delivered his report. Smoke signals between distant camps, he informed Chief Nantai, 4 distinct locations. They use the old war patterns that haven't been seen in a generation. That night, as the village prepared for potential conflict, Gózhŭ sat alone with Thunderheart under the stars. His hand rested on the bull's massive forehead, the connection between them allowing wordless communication deeper than language. What comes next requires different courage than before, he murmured, though whether he addressed the bull, himself, or the watching stars remained unclear. Not to stand against hatred, but to reach toward it once more. Dawn broke with unnatural stillness. No birds sang, no small creatures rustled in the underbrush, a silence reminiscent of the day Thunderheart had broken free, but more profound in its completeness. The village had prepared through the night, defenses positioned, vulnerable members relocated to protected caves, warriors ready with weapons and strategies developed over generations of tribal conflict. Gózhŭ had slept little, his dreams crowded with eagle imagery and warning voices. When he emerged from his dwelling, Thunderheart was already waiting, the bull's massive form silhouetted against the rising sun. Something about its stance suggested readiness, not the nervous energy of fear, but the centered calm of purpose. They come today, Gózhŭ announced to Chief Nantai and the gathered warriors. No vision or message had specified this. He simply knew with the certainty that comes from deep spiritual connection. As morning progressed, scouts reported movement on distant ridges, small groups of men converging toward the village from multiple directions. By midday, these separate units had joined into a more substantial force gathered just beyond arrow range of the village's northern approach. 40, perhaps 50 warriors, reported Makia, after observing from a hidden position. Ashki travels, in their center, carried on a litter. He appears weak in body, but performs continuous rituals. Chief Nantai's expression remained stoic, though concern shadowed his eyes. Even their improved defenses would be challenged by such numbers. A frontal assault would mean significant casualties on both sides. They wait for something, Tarak observed, noting how the gathered force made no immediate move to attack, despite their clear advantage. The fullness of noon, Kassa explained. When the sun stands directly overhead, the boundary between physical and spiritual realms thins. Ashki timed his workings to exploit this. As the sun climbed toward its zenith, Gózhŭ made his decision. Despite objections from warriors and family alike, he asked to be brought to the village entrance, positioned directly in the path any attackers would take. Thunderheart stood beside his wheelchair, a living barrier of muscle and bone. This is not a warrior's strategy, Tarak protested, though his tone held more concern than criticism. Because this is not merely a warrior's battle, Gózhŭ replied. Ashki seeks spiritual victory more than physical conquest. To defeat him, we must fight on that ground. Chief Nantai, after brief contemplation, supported Gózhŭ's approach. Position archers on both flanks, he instructed Tarak. If Gózhŭ's method fails, we defend conventionally. As noon approached, movement stirred in the distant force. Warriors parted to create a path down their center, through which emerged 4 men carrying a wooden platform. Upon this makeshift throne sat Ashki, his once powerful frame now visibly diminished, leaning heavily on a staff adorned with feathers, bones, and intricate carvings. Despite his physical frailty, power emanated from him, a palpable malevolence that seemed to distort the air around his form. The procession halted 100 paces from the village entrance. With evident effort, Ashki rose from his seated position, supported by his staff. Even at this distance, his face was visible deeply lined, eyes sunken but burning with intensity, white hair hanging in thin strands around gaunt features. 15 years Gózhŭ's senior, he now appeared far older than his actual years, as if the curse's backlash had accelerated his aging. Gózhŭ of the steady heart. The shaman's voice carried unnaturally across the intervening space. I have come to complete what was begun. Your village will burn, your people will scatter, and your spirit will feed my power for generations to come. Rather than shout a response, Gózhŭ simply raised a hand in the traditional greeting between spiritual practitioners. This unexpected gesture of respect rather than defiance visibly confused Ashki, causing a momentary hesitation in his advance. Taking advantage of this pause, Chief Nantai wheeled Gózhŭ forward, Thunderheart pacing alongside. Warriors on both sides tensed, weapons ready. As the distance between the two spiritual leaders narrowed at 50 paces, Ashki began to chant guttural syllables that seemed to thicken the air, causing several nearby warriors to stumble as if suddenly disoriented. Gózhŭ felt the curse working wash over him like cold water, testing for weaknesses in his spiritual defenses. At 30 paces, Ashki raised his staff, which began to emit a sickly green light. The symbols carved into its length glowed as if burning from within, and the feathers adorning its top withered visibly, sacrificed to fuel whatever working the shaman attempted. Your animal protector will turn on you, Ashki declared, pointing the staff directly at Thunderheart. The bond I created can be reforged. The bull shuddered as the curse energy struck it, head lowering momentarily as if in pain. But instead of turning against Gózhŭ, as Ashki intended, Thunderheart pressed closer to the wheelchair, physically placing itself between the old warrior and the attacking shaman. This failure visibly shocked Ashki. Impossible, he hissed, his confidence wavering for the first time. What was broken cannot be remade in the same form, Gózhŭ explained calmly, his voice carrying despite its quietness. The bull has been transformed through compassion. Your hatred finds no purchase there, no. With a snarl of frustration, Ashki redirected his attack, staff now aimed directly at Gózhŭ. The green energy intensified, coalescing into a visible stream that struck the seated man in the chest. For a moment, pain contorted Gózhŭ's features, but then, remarkably, he smiled. I receive your hatred, brother, he said softly, and transmute it through forgiveness. As these words were spoken, something extraordinary happened. The malevolent energy flowing from Ashki's staff did not dissipate upon striking Gózhŭ. Instead, it seemed to pass through him, emerging transformed. What had entered as sickly green exited as golden light, expanding in a widening circle that rippled outward from the wheelchair. The golden light expanded in concentric circles from Gózhŭ. Wheelchair, rippling across the ground between the two forces. Where it touched Ashki's warriors, weapons lowered involuntarily, faces softening from battle readiness to confusion. The light carried no compulsion, merely clarity, allowing each man to see the futility of the conflict and the hollow nature of Ashki's promises. Ashki himself stood transfixed, his staff now inert in his trembling hands. A backlash of his failed curse left him visibly diminished, shoulders slumping as if a great weight pressed upon them. For the first time in decades, uncertainty replaced hatred in his expression. What have you done? He whispered, voice barely, carrying across the now silent battlefield. Nothing to you, Gózhŭ replied gently, only refused to make your hatred mine. Thunderheart moved then, advancing slowly toward the shaman. Ashki's supporters tensed, expecting the bull to charge, but its approach held no aggression, only a deliberate purpose that kept warriors from interfering. When the massive animal reached Ashki, it simply stood before him, liquid eyes meeting the shaman's gaze with what appeared to be recognition. He remembers you, Gózhŭ explained, wheeled forward by Chief Nantai until he was alongside the bull, not with anger, but with understanding. The vessel recalls the hand that shaped it. Ashki's staff slipped from his grasp, striking the ground with a hollow sound. Without its support, his frail body began to collapse. But Thunderheart moved with surprising gentleness, allowing the old shaman to brace himself against its massive shoulder. I spent a lifetime cultivating that hatred, Ashki said, his voice suddenly that of a tired old man rather than a fearsome spiritual leader. What remains if it is gone? The wisdom earned through your years, Gózhŭ suggested. The knowledge you gathered before vengeance became your purpose. Around them, warriors from both sides watched in wary fascination as the confrontation transformed into conversation. Weapons remained ready, but lowered, the immediate threat of violence receding with each passing moment. Chief Nantai stepped forward, his presence reinforcing the shift from conflict to potential reconciliation. Your warriors are welcome to lay down arms and share water, he announced formally. No blood has been spilled. No vengeance is required. For a tense moment, the outcome balanced on a knife's edge. Then, one of Ashki's lieutenants, a middle-aged man with the scars of many battles, deliberately placed his bow on the ground. We followed Ashki's vision of restoring honor through victory, he stated. But I see no honor in continuing when spiritual forces have spoken so clearly. Others followed his example, weapons laid aside in growing numbers. Some did so eagerly, suggesting they had joined the expedition more from tribal obligation than personal conviction. Others complied with obvious reluctance, but recognized the shifting tide dot as tensions eased. Kasa approached Ashki, her medicine woman's authority, allowing her to address him directly despite the lingering animosity. Your body suffers from more than age, she observed clinically. The backlash of broken workings has disrupted your internal harmony. The old shaman attempted a dismissive gesture, but pain visibly shot through his arm with the movement. I need no enemy's healing, he muttered. Perhaps not, Gózhŭ agreed. But would you accept a fellow practitioner's assistance? Our methods differ, but our understanding of the spirit world shares common roots. This framing acknowledgement of Ashki as a spiritual equal rather than a defeated enemy offered the dignity the proud old man desperately needed. After visible internal struggle, he gave a single, sharp nod of consent. What followed became the foundation of stories told for generations afterward. In the neutral ground between opposed forces, Gózhŭ directed the creation of a small ceremonial space. A fire was built, purifying herbs placed upon the flames. Thunderheart lay down, creating a windbreak with its massive body. Ashki was helped to a seated position opposite Gózhŭ. The fire between them, Kasa prepared a special medicine bowl, a clay vessel used only in healing ceremonies of significant importance. Into this she placed water from both tribes' territories, herbs gathered under specific moons, and finally a single hair from both spiritual leaders' dot. As the medicine steeped, Chief Nantai took a bold step toward lasting peace. He approached with the ceremonial pipe and item, used to signify sacred agreements between peoples. Filling it with special tobacco mixed with bearberry leaves, he lit it from the central fire and offered the first straw to Ashki. The significance was lost on no one present. By tribal custom, offering first smoke to Ashki acknowledged him as an honored guest rather than a defeated enemy. More importantly, it recognized his status as a spiritual leader despite the conflict between them. For a long moment, Ashki stared at the offered pipe, decades of hatred warring with the fundamental respect for tradition ingrained since childhood. Finally, with hands that trembled slightly, he accepted the pipe, drew the sacred smoke, and exhaled toward the four directions in proper ceremonial fashion. When the pipe passed to Gózhŭ, he repeated the ritual with equal solemnity. As smoke curled upward from the pipe, something shifted in the atmosphere, not just between the two men, but among all gathered. An almost audible exhalation of collective tension released years of accumulated hostility. My heart has carried a stone since our first conflict, Ashki admitted, his voice stronger now. It became heavier with each passing season until it was all I could feel. Such burdens shape us, Gózhŭ acknowledged, but need not define us forever. As afternoon lengthened toward evening, warriors who had arrived as enemies cautiously began interacting as distant relatives, which many were, the tribal divisions having occurred within living memory. Food was brought from the village, water shared. Tentative conversations kindled around smaller fires. 1 year passed, marked by the full cycle of seasons: winter's cleansing snow, spring's renewal, summer's abundance, and now autumn's golden preparation for rest. The village had flourished in ways that extended beyond physical prosperity. New dwellings stood where damaged ones had been, larger and sturdier. Food stores overflowed from successful hunts and abundant harvests. Children played with the carefree abandon that comes only in times of true security. Most remarkable were the changes in relationships, both within the community and with neighboring tribes. The reconciliation begun that day with Ashki had expanded into formal peace agreements, then trade partnerships, and finally cultural exchanges that enriched all involved. Where once scouts watched boundaries for enemies, now they guided visitors bringing goods and knowledge from distant places. On this particular morning, with frost silvering the ground and the sun casting long shadows from the eastern mountains, Gózhŭ sat beneath his cottonwood tree, observing preparations for the autumn gratitude ceremony. His wheelchair, now adorned with symbols of his spiritual status, had been positioned to provide the best view of the activities in the plaza. Thunderheart lay nearby, massive head resting on enormous forelegs. The bull had become as much a fixture of village life as the council fire or the elders' lodge, a living reminder of transformation's possibilities. Children still clambered over its broad back without fear, though they did so with the respect due to a being recognized as more than mere animal. "They have completed it," Nijoni announced, approaching with evident satisfaction. Sadie finished the final symbols this morning. She referred to the story blanket, an ambitious project, begun during winter's confinement and continued through changing seasons. Women from both Gózhŭ's village and Ashki's band had collaborated on the massive weaving, creating a visual record of the confrontation and reconciliation that had changed both communities. And Nijoni's gesture. Several young women proudly carried the completed blanket for Gózhŭ's inspection. Its intricate patterns depicted the bull's arrival, its curse-driven rampage, Gózhŭ's courageous embrace, and the golden light of transformation that had ultimately healed ancient wounds between the tribes. Central to the design was the image of a paralyzed man extending arms toward a charging bull, the moment of greatest courage captured in woven threads. "Your story will travel far beyond our people now," Nijoni said softly, standing beside her. "Husband's chair. Those who trade for this blanket will carry its teaching to places we will never see." Gózhŭ nodded, touched by the realization that his experience would outlive him, becoming part of the larger tapestry of tribal wisdom. "The credit belongs to many," he said. "I was merely the vessel placed in the right position." "A vessel must be both strong enough to hold what fills it and willing to be filled," came a familiar voice. Ashki approached slowly, leaning on a walking stick far simpler than his former staff of power. The old shaman's health had improved in the months following their confrontation, though age still bent his frame and whitened his hair. The two spiritual leaders had developed an unexpected friendship, not intimate or easy, but grounded in mutual respect and shared understanding of realms invisible to most. Monthly, Ashki made the journey between communities to continue spiritual discussions begun during his healing. Today, he had arrived earlier than usual to participate in the gratitude ceremony. The young ones completed their training? Gózhŭ inquired, referring to the 3 youths from each village, who had shown spiritual sensitivity and been selected for special instruction. Ashki nodded with evident satisfaction. They learn quickly. The girl, especially Talida, has remarkable perception. The mention of Talida brought a smile to Gózhŭ's face. The child who had first approached Thunderheart without fear now spent hours at Gózhŭ's side, absorbing traditional knowledge with eager enthusiasm. Her natural connection with animals and intuitive understanding of healing plants suggested a future medicine woman of significant ability. Throughout the day, visitors arrived from surrounding communities, some traveling several days specifically for the ceremony. Each brought gifts and stories, contributing to the growing sense of occasion. By mid-afternoon, the village hosted nearly 3 times its normal population, yet the atmosphere remained harmonious, organization flowing from generations of ceremonial practice. As sunset approached, the formal gratitude ceremony began. Chief Nantai, his leadership strengthened rather than diminished by the inclusion of spiritual wisdom in tribal decisions, called the gathering to order with dignified authority. Beside him stood Tarak, now recognized as future chief, but tempered by lessons in balanced leadership that incorporated both physical and spiritual strength. When the time came for blessing the community's path forward, all eyes turned expectantly to Gózhŭ. With Nijoni's assistance, he moved to the central position beside the council fire. Thunderheart followed, taking its now customary place at his side. Together, man and bull presented a powerful symbol that needed no explanation to those gathered. We stand between seasons, Gózhŭ began, his voice carrying clearly across the hushed assembly. Between what was and what will be. This is the teaching Thunderheart brought to us. The transformation requires a moment of balance where we are neither what we were nor what we shall become. He gestured toward the story blanket, now displayed prominently for all to see. The courage this story honors is not mine alone. It belongs to every person who chooses embrace over rejection, understanding over fear, reconciliation over vengeance. As he spoke, the setting sun cast golden light across the gathering, reminiscent of the transformative energy that had ended the confrontation with Ashki. Many present had witnessed that moment, and murmurs of recognition spread through the crowd. Each day offers new choices, Gózhŭ continued. New opportunities to stand steady when others flee, to reach out when others withdraw, to transform what seems unchangeable. From his position nearby, Ashki added unexpectedly, and to release what we believed essential, but merely weighed us down. The old shaman's contribution, unplanned but perfectly aligned, symbolized the genuine healing between former enemies. As darkness fell, fires were lit throughout the village. Drums began a heartbeat rhythm, songs rose from gathered voices, and the celebration of continued life took root. Children danced with elders, stories were exchanged between once separate peoples, and plans for shared hunting grounds and expanded trade were discussed among tribal leaders. Gózhŭ and Nijoni withdrew slightly from the festivities, finding a quiet spot where they could observe without being at the center of attention. Thunderheart followed, settling beside Gózhŭ's wheelchair with the contentment of a being exactly where it belonged. "Did you ever imagine," Nijoni asked softly, "when you sat alone in that plaza facing death, that such good would grow from that moment?" Gózhŭ considered the question seriously before answering. "Not specifically this good," he admitted, "but I believed something of value would come from truth faced without flinching." As the celebration continued into evening, Gózhŭ and Thunderheart watched the sunset paint the western mountains in hues of gold and crimson. The paralyzed warrior and the once cursed bull, both transformed through a single act of courage, stood as living testimony that even in broken vessels, remarkable light could shine.